but parts of the world attract significantly more sightings than others, known as UFO hotspots. And there's one very close to home. Central Scotland has its very own Area 51. The Falkirk Triangle, stretching from Stirling to the outskirts of Edinburgh. This certified extraterrestrial hotspot averages over 300 officially reported sightings every year. It's up there as one of the best places on the planet to see a UFO.
What the is that? Something in one.
From cigar-shaped crafts to mysterious lights and even chance meetings with extraterrestrial beings, the list is endless. Ex-MOD man Nick Pope, during his time on the UFO desk in the early 90s, took hundreds of calls.
There were sightings all over the place. They were coming in left, right, and centre. The media was running stories. There were a number of fascinating individual cases, some alleged abductions. It was all happening.
One thing is for certain, close encounters of the Scottish kind are in a league of their own.
What is going on? Why are there so many UFO sightings being reported, and why is it carried on? A lot of information has been kept back because it would be too disturbing to everybody to appreciate that we are not alone, that there are other entities out there.
The first case we're going to look at in more detail is one of the most infamous Scottish UFO encounters. 42 years ago, deep in Deckment Woods, West Lothian, a 61-year-old man didn't just see a UFO, he was attacked by it. The encounter was so disturbing, it was even investigated by the British police. On the 9th of November, 1979, forestry worker and respected war hero Robert Taylor was checking fences in woodland at the edge of his small village when the unimaginable happened. Entering a clearing, Robert came face to face with a large flying dome hovering above the forest floor. The dome was approximately 6 meters across with a rough, dark metallic texture and small propellers on its outer rim. As he approached, something terrifying happened. 2 spheres covered in spikes dropped from the main craft, flew towards him, attached to his legs, and began dragging him violently towards the craft. Robert's next memory is waking up 20 minutes later, injured, dishevelled, and temporarily unable to talk. The horrific encounter changed Robert's life forever and left a Scottish small village dubbed the Twilight Zone. So, Sarah, this first case, what have we got?
Well, this one's particularly interesting, and it's a bold claim. It's a claim of an encounter of the fourth kind, which basically means that an alien or a UFO interacted.
Have we got any evidence of this?
Well, this is the thing, because when you've got this extraordinary claim, the normal thing to do is trust and then verify, but we've got very little to verify it on so far. What we've got is a sketch, and this is a photocopy of a sketch which is done by the police, and there's also a video where he was interviewed sometime after the incident.
Okay, can we look at the video? Robert Taylor sadly passed away in 2007 at the age of 88. But until his death, his story remained consistent with this archive news report.
I was amazed to see in front of me this huge dome-shaped ship, you know, and just couldn't believe my eyes.
What would you have thought of someone who had just said on television what you've just said?
Well, doubtful if I would believe. It's a thing that you have to see, I'd think, before you could believe.
Now, Sarah, this guy is an upstanding member of the community. He's a churchgoer, no history of mental illness or anything like that. But that is evidence that he said it happened. It's not evidence of it actually
Exactly.
happening.
We're trying to prove something extraordinary. We're trying to prove that we're not alone in the universe and that potentially aliens have visited Earth. If you're going to try and prove something like that, you need a lot of evidence.
So far, all we have to go on is an artist's impression of the craft seen by Robert Taylor, which formed part of the police investigation. together with the testimony of a now retired police officer who was one of the first at the scene at the time and has since corroborated what Taylor says he saw.
Once we saw the marks on the ground, I thought, well, something's been here. This is where Robert Taylor stopped. Whatever it was heavy, it was there, and the only way that went was up through there.
Can we look at the sketch?
Yeah.
See, my problem with this sketch is it looks a little like Emperor Ming's spaceship from Flash Gordon.
So when people first saw UFOs, going back a few hundred years ago, they would see flames in the night sky or things that they could relate to. And then you come to the 20th and the 21st century, and things look like Flash Gordon or Star Wars and things which look like science fiction. But something which is beyond the imagination is something we need to investigate.
OK, so Sarah, how do we move this investigation forward?
Well, this is the thing, because we can't speak to Robert, it leaves us in a bit of a hole, but we have got someone called Malcolm Robinson. Now, he's an author and a paranormal investigator who's dedicated his life to investigating this case.
Malcolm spoke to Robert about his extraordinary experience numerous times before his death and has acquired a forensic understanding of the case. Malcolm, Craig Charles here, how are you?
Hi, Craig. Very well.
In the case of Robert Taylor from 1979, what proof have we got? Because at the moment, all we've got is he said it happened and he's done a sketch, which the police then augmented.
Well, we have a lot of proof, Craig. We do have in our possession the actual very ripped trousers that Robert Taylor wore on that eventful morning of November the 9th, 1979. And as you can see on one of the legs here, it has got a rip there. If we turn the trousers over here, you can see a different type of rip there. These trousers were analysed by the police forensic department in Edinburgh. These trousers were not ripped by any forest debris like sharp stones or sharp twigs. This was clearly a mechanical upwards movement of the trousers. It's an astonishing case.
How seriously did the police take this?
Well, they took it very serious indeed. So much so, in fact, that they erected a fence around the perimeter of this incident, which was, to ensure that members of the public did not stray into this area, because clearly there was these track-like marks and a circular and triangular indentations. I was there a few days later and I saw myself these marks, and you could physically see that there had been some kind of struggle going on in that particular area. And the police knew Bob Taylor, and they knew that he would not dream of making up a story of this nature. It was the furthest thing from his mind.
What do you think it could possibly be?
There are many theories, Craig. One of those theories is that the forestry worker digested some form of, it's called a Tropa belladonna. It's a rare berry which can cause hallucinations, and sometimes it can even cause death. Now, there's no evidence of that plant being in Decmont Woods. People have said perhaps it was epilepsy, an epileptic fit. He had no, history of epilepsy in the family. But to this day, I'm convinced of the sincerity, of the honesty of this witness.
And Malcolm, of course, this isn't the only strange sighting in Scotland. There's in fact been a hub of sightings in Scotland. Since
1992, Scotland has seen a rise of UFO reports coming from the central belt of Scotland. There was one case, a gentleman was driving to Stirling with his two young sons. And as they're driving down this lowly B road, his young son in the back screamed out, "Dad, what's that?" And the father looked through the windscreen and you could see this two-tiered jet black shiny craft with red lights on its underside, just floating above a field. We also had the Sloggett family who were walking on the moors above Bonnybridge. This blue ball of light descended from the heavens and landed in a field. And as it did so, the farmer's fence started to vibrate very violently, and they just took to their heels and screamed away. We've also had a number of photographs taken of UFOs from that particular area. Famous photograph taken by Phil Trevis. He was there to take some photographs of the BP petrochemical plant at night. It burns off gas flares, etc. And as he was setting up the tripod, he looked to his left and he saw, coming from the Ocho Hills, this red ball of light moving very fast. And then it stopped. It was about 300 feet above his head, and he had to physically bend over backwards. And the photograph he took shows the underside of this object, which has a concave underside, and it's throwing out light.
But Malcolm, at this Falkirk Triangle, what do you think they're looking for there, these extraterrestrials?
Well, we don't know for sure what's going on. All we do know with sincerity is that people are reporting things to the airports and the police that defy description. So we have to find out what is going on in the skies above Scotland.
Wow, Sarah, it's gone from one story to like multiple stories. This case is getting bigger.
I mean, his evidence was very compelling. It seems like this area of Scotland is a hub of UFO sightings.
Okay, so where do we go next?
We need to dig deeper.
This is getting really interesting. America has Area 51. We have the Falkirk Triangle, stretching east to Fife and back to Stirling. This triangle is a major hotspot for UFO activity. Since the early 90s, sightings of flashing lights, flying saucers, and even violent close encounters with alien tech have been reported.
Scotland has seen a rise of UFO reports coming from the central belt of Scotland. People suddenly find themselves embroiled in what we can only describe as a twilight zone.
Sightings in the region include Robert Taylor's terrifying close encounter of the fourth kind in Deckman Woods in November 1979.
I was amazed to see this huge dome-shaped ship. Just couldn't believe my eyes.
And the bizarre sighting of a glowing craft captured at night at Polmont Reservoir in 1991. We have actual photographic evidence reportedly showing the underbelly of a circular UFO as it streaked overhead. But what's really striking about the Scottish UFO phenomenon is the sheer volume of reports. The hundreds of mysterious encounters in the region logged with the authorities every year are a major cause of concern for the locals, with the authorities yet to provide a rational explanation. In this investigation, we'll stop at nothing to get to the truth about what's really happening in the skies and forests of central Scotland. So we started out by investigating the case of Robert Taylor, who in 1979 claims he saw a spacecraft in the woods in West Lothian. It attacked him, ripped his clothes, left him so traumatised that for a short while he couldn't speak. It's now turned into a mass of sightings all over the Falkirk Triangle. So, Sarah, is something happening, and is it extraterrestrial?
We've got this huge amount of sightings, but there could be multiple reasons to explain that. It could be hysteria. We've seen that throughout history. For example, when War of the Worlds was first played on the radio, people thought there was an actual alien invasion. It could also be the simple fact that this is more of a rural area, so there's clear skies, people are looking up more and they just see things that they might not have seen before.
What is quite strange is it all seems to be happening in this triangle here around Falkirk.
I think that's what's interesting for me. We've got a cluster of sightings in the same area in Scotland. Is something being drawn there? Is it the military? We need to find out what is going on here, what it could potentially be.
You can't get away from the fact that so many people have called this in, so many people have seen something that they don't understand.
Well, we need to speak to Nick Pope, former MOD investigator, UFO expert, and what he doesn't know about this case isn't worth knowing. So Nick, Scotland's certainly been a hotspot for UFO sightings.
Yes, it has, and particularly from about 1990 through to about 2010, there were sightings all over the place. They were coming in left, right, and centre. The media was running stories. There were a number of fascinating individual cases, some alleged abductions. It was all happening.
Can you just talk us through some of the sightings?
Well, one really interesting sighting involved an amateur artist called Ian McPherson. This was 1994 in Bonnybridge. he was out taking some photographs at a particular reservoir that he wanted to paint. And he said a huge UFO was hovering over the water and right in front of him. And he said he had the camera in his hands, and yet it was like he was in a trance watching this huge UFO. And it was only when the UFO began to move away that it was like the spell was broken. He grabbed his camera and he fired off a shot.
Can you describe the image? What was captured on that one image?
The photo showed an apparently disc-shaped object with maybe a difference between the rim and the main body of the object. That was, I think, pretty much all you could see.
Surely you can just say, well, he didn't see anything. If just an excuse saying he couldn't take this photo. Why couldn't he get that image when it was close?
Well, he would say that he was so much like a rabbit in the headlights, that he was frozen with some mixture of emotions. Believers, true believers in the UFO community, say it's more than that. Any civilization with the technology to devise interstellar travel, maybe they've got some way that they can switch witnesses on and off and, put them in a state of mind where they won't use a camera. I don't know.
And what did you conclude from your investigation?
It was just somebody relating an experience that had genuinely puzzled him. He seemed to be a straightforward, honest witness with nothing to gain from this story. He seemed to be genuinely puzzled, wanting some answers.
So do you think with your background in the MOD investigating this and the work you do now, you're well placed to know whether someone's hoaxing you or not?
If somebody hoaxes a photo, the intelligence community has all sorts of resources and capabilities that can tell if a photo is being hoaxed. We found no evidence of any fakery with this.
Well, what do you make of that?
So what do you think? Kind of the Men in Black with nebulizers to get rid of your memory. Do you think something like that could be going on? Because, this guy, he's seeing this thing, but he's frozen. He says he's he can't move to get the picture.
I think that's highly unlikely. That is a bold idea to come up with. We've got no evidence of that. But I think it's that fear thing, isn't it? If something terrifies you, sometimes you can't actually move. So you can understand someone being paralysed by fear. But what I thought was interesting from that is what Nick Pope was saying about how some of these sightings are false. And it goes back to this hysteria. And I think that makes our task even harder because we've got to go through everything and work out what's real and what's fake.
In the mid-90s, at the peak of the UFO activity, the local government, under pressure from concerned residents, agreed to hold an official meeting to discuss the phenomena. No conclusion was drawn, although alcohol was mooted as a possible factor in the sightings, a sentiment which was reflected in the national press.
We know that in the 60s and the 50s in the US, this kind of thing was happening. When the US government was doing very serious UFO investigations, the media were dismissing the claims. And the reason they were doing that is because they didn't want genuine sightings to be muddied by false sightings. So that, for me, is interesting.
How are we going to find our truth in this investigation?
Well, there's one person we need to speak to, one person who might hold the key.
Falkirk Provost and long-standing councillor Billy Buchanan has spent decades trying to persuade the British government to carry out a probe into the sightings. Let's talk to him.
So, Billy, can you just explain your involvement with all these unusual sightings?
Well, the fact is, I've tried every single thing to try and get somebody to come forward. We've been down to every Prime Minister, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, to try and get an official investigation into this phenomenon in this area. When the Scottish Parliament opened, 1999, I contacted them and says, look, we've got a problem in our area. And all I got was an email back saying, look, Billy, don't get involved in this. It's political suicide. The question is still unanswered. What is it?
Do you think the government knows more than they're letting on and the government is potentially hiding things?
Well, I was doing something around Westminster and the Houses of Parliament, and I remember being sort of roughly pushed about with these gentlemen that came across the road when I was standing with this placard. But when I went to my hotel that night, there was a video waiting for me and a cassette, and somebody had handed this in. Now I found out later it was an MP, and obviously we've got to be discreet, no mention his name, but it was a tape that clearly was to do with aircraft flying in the Bonnybridge area. So I went up to the Cumbernauld Airport. I gave them the tape and I said, look, I've been given this tape. I wonder if you could tell me whether it's fact or fiction. I was up in the control tower with the owner. He played the tape and he said that the tape was genuine. We're in a holding area for Glasgow, Edinburgh and Newcastle, and these pilots flying were seeing quite clearly that they saw UFOs in the Bonnybridge and Falkirk Triangle area. You say to yourself, this gives it more credibility, and you keep going forward hoping that someday that we're going to have an answer.
Billy, do you still have that tape? Because we'd love to see it.
Well, the fact is, film crew wanted us to give them copies, and what happened was we never ever heard from them, we never seen them again, their telephone numbers went blank. When you talk about people sort of will maybe laugh about the men in black and so forth, but I can tell you on a number of occasions that we've had individuals who we could say that weren't there for what everybody else was there for.
Well, I mean, if the evidence pointing to what you're saying is pointing to, it's mind-boggling.
But the fact of the matter is that we want an answer. The government isn't going to give us an answer. So whether it's the military trying out things or whether it's something different, who knows?
But Billy, it's been great talking to you. There's something spooky going on in Scotland, but you won't find it in the deep waters of its lochs. Instead, look to the skies. With more UFO sightings and close encounters than anywhere else in the world, the Falkirk Triangle in central Scotland is an internationally recognised UFO hotspot, with thousands of reports logged over the last 3 decades. We're on a mission to establish whether this extraordinary phenomenon has an earthly explanation or whether extraterrestrial craft are visiting Earth. The village of Bonnybridge was the scene of one of the first reported sightings. In 1989, glowing objects appeared before a stunned fire crew before speeding across the sky. In January 1993, a couple spotted 2 large triangular objects low in the sky above the Castle Carey Railway viaduct. And we've heard about the 1991 Polmont Reservoir sighting and an extraordinary photo showing a disc-shaped red UFO.
And the photograph he took shows the underside of this object, which has a concave underside and it's throwing out light.
One of the most vivid descriptions is of a sighting of a UFO by an amateur photographer at Craiglusca Reservoir. A 2-tiered classic saucer, caught apparently in mid-flight.
We found no evidence of any fakery with this.
We also spoke to Provost Billy Buchanan about his fight for the truth, and he's convinced dark forces are at work.
We never ever heard from them, we never seen them again, their telephone numbers went blank.
Shadowy forces, conspiracy theories, but Billy and Malcolm so absolutely passionate about what they say is the truth.
See, this is my concern. If you're going to truly investigate something like this, you need to have an open mind. But it feels like, in some way, they're so convinced that the answer is alien, that they're not prepared to find that it's something much closer to Earth.
Billy mentioned Cumbernauld quite a lot.
I went up to the Cumbernauld Airport. I was up in the control tower with the owner, and he said that the tape was genuine.
Do you know anything about Cumbernauld?
If you look at the Falkirk Triangle here, right almost in the middle is Cumbernauld.
Cumbernauld is a small, busy, mixed-use airport, host to a diverse range of craft, from helicopters to jets and charter planes. And just outside the Falkirk Triangle are even more airports, some used by the UK and US military.
And we know that often throughout history, mysterious sights, claims of UFOs, unidentified flying objects, have just been military tests which haven't been communicated to the public. So there's a lot of earthly explanations still to this, but it is unusual. The number of people who've come forward with sightings is still of interest.
Okay, so we got one more person to help us prove that this actually happened. Leading Scottish UFO investigator and author Ron Halliday has spoken in depth to hundreds of witnesses and remains convinced the Falkirk Triangle is a real phenomenon. Ron, it's Craig Charles here. Listen, how solid is the evidence?
Well, I think the evidence is pretty solid. I mean, obviously, people do misidentify certain things, and no question about it. When you're dealing with people like airline pilots who report seeing UFOs, buzzing them, then, I think there's a significant amount of evidence that there is something strange going on over Scotland.
You're talking about evidence, but accounts aren't enough to prove something extraordinary.
I mean, although I'd agree that people seeing an odd light in the sky maybe can be, dismissed or difficult to interpret, it's harder to dismiss the evidence when people have something that they come up against, maybe just 100 yards or even closer, something really out of the ordinary. People aren't making these things up. They are really reporting quite strange things.
But Ron, why do you think it's happening in the Falkirk Triangle? What's there that's interesting these extraterrestrials so much?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that is the big question. Some people are saying we're being visited by aliens from distant planets, but another possibility is that we're seeing into other dimensions, into other worlds. I mean, even some scientists are saying, we could be living in multi-universes. So, I think that, that is one possibility, but I don't think anybody has come up with a clear-cut answer.
But what evidence have you got of that? Because that's a huge claim, but it's just a claim. It's just a tall story right now.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. That it is difficult to be 100% definite about things, but I think people are reporting seeing something really strange, like an alien entity, or it seems like a spacecraft close up. I mean, I don't see how you can just dismiss that, because it goes contrary to what we understand as everyday life.
What I don't understand, Ron, is that everyone has a mobile phone these days with a camera on it. And if you're talking about close-up interactions with alien life forms, how come we've got no video evidence of that? Because everyone has a phone.
Yeah, I mean, I don't deny that that is a question that isn't easy to come, with a proper answer to. I mean, some people say there are already lots of close-up videos that places like the Ministry of Defence, just because we don't have anything in the public domain doesn't mean that there are things that have been kept back from the public.
Do you think there are forces at play in this country that are trying to keep us in the dark, Ron?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the government should take this phenomenon quite seriously and actually conduct proper investigations into it.
I mean, what specific evidence have you seen regarding the Falkirk Triangle that you would say is 100% convincing?
I mean, I think we have to weigh things up and ask ourselves, is the sheer volume of reports evidence that something really strange is going on? People have been frightened by what's been happening. People have been demanding answers to it. So I think, we have to accept this is a really strange phenomenon, whatever the answer is.
Well, Ron, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate what you've been able to tell us.
Thank you.
Ron has shared some valuable insight, and he's certainly convinced something's going on. But although the volume of the UFO sightings in the Falkirk Triangle is undeniable, it's not the hard proof we're looking for. We're still struggling to substantiate the facts. You've got to have more evidence for me than this.
You're right. We're looking for the diamond in the rough. We're looking for that thing which is going to prove something extraordinary. So things which aren't compelling, they don't work for me.
But just in, video footage of a more recent sighting. A triangular UFO captured on dashcam in Broxburn, West Lothian, just 3 miles from Deckment Woods.
This is one of the latest UFO sightings from the Falkirk Triangle.
Okay, show me. If this footage, captured in the Falkirk Triangle, shows a clear image of a UFO, it could change the course of this investigation. Scotland appears to be the destination of choice for interstellar visitors, from good old-fashioned flying saucers to inexplicably advanced alien technology. But despite numerous appeals by local leaders to the authorities, no official explanation for the phenomenon exists. Between 1990 and 2010, authorities received a flood of UFO reports, but hard proof that extraterrestrials are buzzing Scotland is frustratingly thin on the ground.
I think we have to weigh things up and ask ourselves, is the sheer volume of reports evidence that something really strange is going on?
What we desperately need in this case is incontestable proof. And just into the hub is recent video footage of a triangular UFO captured on dashcam in Broxburn, West Lothian. Could this be the smoking gun we've been looking for? Okay, so there it is, top right of the frame. What is that?
That looks like an aeroplane to me.
It doesn't quite look like an aeroplane.
Can we play it again?
Yeah, please.
There it is. That is unusual.
Kind of triangular, lights at 3 sides. I don't think it looks like an aeroplane.
But it could be military aircraft.
Yeah,
Something that we haven't seen. Well, good, because the car's moving, you
Yeah.
can't tell whether it's,
No.
you know, what speed it's going at, how it's behaving.
It didn't look like it was going very fast, though, did it?
No, it was almost hovering.
Mm.
That is interesting. And my first thought was an aircraft, but you're right, you have got that triangular shape, but then doesn't mean it's an alien spacecraft coming to kidnap people. It just means it's something that you and I can't explain right now.
Yeah. I wonder how many new planes are the military developing?
But the thing is, we won't know. So there have been cases like the Blackbird SR-71. Before that was released publicly, people would mistake that with its wing-like shape, its stealth shape, for a UFO. So it could be a military aircraft that we don't understand, but...
Sarah, please believe me, I really want to believe.
I know.
But at the moment, I'm not convinced. This extraordinary case has taken us on a roller coaster ride, and to be honest, it's one of the most frustrating. But before we reach a final conclusion, we need to take stock of everything we've learned over our investigation. So, Sarah, we started out with the case of Robert Taylor, who claimed that in the woods in 1979 in West Lothian, he saw something that looked like this. 42 years ago in Deckment Woods near Livingston, respected war hero Robert Taylor claimed that as he entered a clearing, he came face to face with a UFO, hovering a few feet off the ground.
I was amazed to see this huge dome-shaped ship. Just couldn't believe my eyes.
What happened next defied imagination. Spike's fears rolled towards Robert, grabbed hold of his trousers and pulled him violently towards the craft.
We do have in our possession the actual very ripped trousers. This was clearly a mechanical upwards movement of the trousers.
We've got this claim of an interaction, an encounter of the fourth kind, but we haven't got much evidence. This could potentially be ball lightning, which caused the incident with Robert Taylor, for example, or he may have had an epileptic fit or something else might have happened, but I don't think we'll ever know.
I'm sure he's an honourable man, but there's no evidence that it occurred, this event. You need more than a ripped pair of pants.
I believe that Malcolm, who investigated this, believes it happened, and he believes it's got an extraterrestrial origin, but belief isn't enough with this for me.
Then it turned into a mass of sightings in something that we've called the Falkirk Triangle. Is something happening in the Falkirk Triangle? And is it extraterrestrial? We established the true scale of UFO activity within the Falkirk Triangle.
Scotland has seen a rise of UFO reports. People are reporting things to the airports and the police that defy description.
We also discovered that photographic evidence relative to the quantity of reports is rare. But there are 2 images we were able to examine. The Polmont Reservoir photo, which purportedly shows the underside of a glowing red UFO at night. And a daytime image taken at Falkirk Reservoir of a classic flying saucer. But to be honest, these images on their own haven't entirely won me over. I mean, that one was taken at Falkirk Reservoir, and to me that looks like a frisbee. And I wish it wasn't the case, but I'm not quite convinced. And this one, where he said he was bending over and taking the photograph right underneath the spaceship, that to me, that could be a camping stove.
Yeah, a photograph's not good enough. I think they're interesting, but it's not evidence. It's just someone's photographs. They could be anything.
We shared our frustrations about the limited availability of photographic evidence with UFO investigator Ron Halliday. You're talking about close-up interactions with alien life forms. How come we've got no video evidence of that? Because everyone has a phone.
I don't deny that that is a question that isn't easy to come, with a proper answer to.
But we also spoke to Falkirk Provost Billy Buchanan. He was so convinced that something is going on in Scottish skies, he dedicated years to finding the truth.
We've been down to every Prime Minister, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown. I've tried every single thing to try and get somebody to come forward.
Only to find the doors of power slammed shut.
But when it comes to something extraterrestrial, we've got some people who very much believe that, but I'm not convinced. We haven't got that strong piece of evidence to say, yes, this is something otherworldly.
But we must keep in mind the remarkable and recent dashcam sighting, showing a triangular UFO hovering close to a dual carriageway. It doesn't quite look like an aeroplane.
There it is. That is unusual.
It certainly can't be explained. And we know it's not the first triangular craft seen in this area. Back in 1993, 2 triangular UFOs were reported near the Castle Carey railway viaduct. But the final word must go to UFO expert and ex-MOD official Nick Pope.
In your opinion, are the sightings reported within the Falkirk Triangle credible?
A lot of them will turn out to have conventional explanations as misidentifications. There will probably be some hoaxes too, but in there somewhere is what I refer to as the core phenomenon. And that remains unexplained to this day, both with the Falkirk Triangle sightings and indeed the phenomenon as a whole.
Now, we must come to a final verdict. Have we proved extraterrestrials are visiting Scotland? So I think we've got to say that in the case of Robert Taylor and the Falkirk Triangle, case not proven.
Yet.
The perplexing and disturbing case of Robert Taylor and the Falkirk Triangle for now remains unsolved. There's just not enough corroborating evidence. But over the last 30 years, the people of Scotland have risked their reputations to state on record they've encountered a UFO. So I remain convinced there's much more to this story. Somewhere out there is the truth. And as governments around the world begin to open their vaults of secrets to the public, we move ever closer to the moment that will change humanity. The discovery that we are not alone.